Welcome back to another episode of ROC Boys Football. Taking a look at the Florida Gators as they roll into their spring game Thursday night. Talking just a couple things of what I want to see, some question marks I have for this program heading into the 2023 season, and some potential answers we'll see during the spring game. Now, before we even get into it, I just want to say thank you to you guys. Just absolutely ton of support from the Florida Gators fans, whether we're talking recruiting, whether we're talking play on the college football field. You guys have been absolutely awesome. So if you do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel. More importantly, we're going live right after the Florida spring game to kind of recap what we saw. So if you do enjoy it, lock in for that as well. We, again, just appreciate all the support. More importantly, if you guys have some players that I should add to my notebook as I'm starting to prep this Florida spring game, let me know in the comment section some players I need to keep my eye on. Again, I learned a lot from you guys who are kind of in touch with some of the sleeper players that are emerging in spring practice. Without further ado, though, let's get into it. Going to start at the quarterback position. Obviously, the quarterback battle, I think most Florida Gator fans have that consensus that Graham Mertz will be the starting quarterback to start the 2023 season. And from what I've heard, from what I've been reading from the spring practice notes, Jack Miller playing some really good football, which is good. I'm with y'all in the sense that Graham Mertz will be the starting quarterback in 2023, but having competition in that quarterback room is going to be big. I'm actually probably more optimistic than most on Graham Mertz. Like, this dude was a former top 100 prospect, has really good arm talent, can move outside the pocket. He's obviously not the athlete Anthony Richardson was. I think he was just in a really tough spot in Wisconsin in terms of putting up numbers and looking good as a quarterback, because it's really hard to do that within that Wisconsin offense. I think a change of scenery is going to be really good for Graham Mertz. He's an accurate passer, and from a consistency level, and probably a little bit more of a consistent passer than Anthony Richardson. Now, does he have the ceiling? Does he have all those traits that Anthony Richardson has? Probably not, but I'm really excited to see how they operate this offense with Graham Mertz. And then again, checking out Jack Miller, how he looks in terms of pushing Graham Mertz. I think you're feeling decent about this quarterback room, but I'm more in tune and more concentrated in terms of the spring game on this wide receiver group. By this last year, yes, Anthony Richardson struggled, but this wide receiver group last year was probably as bad as we've seen it for Florida in a very long time. And you look at when you've had success on the offensive side of the ball for Florida, it's having those elite playmakers on the outside. Tony, Kyle Pitts, Grimes was really good. I mean, they've had some really good receivers, and when you see Florida operating their best offense, they're recruiting the position extremely well, and they're developing really, really talented pass catchers. That, quite frankly, just wasn't the case. Again, if you guys have been listening to me for a long time, like a guy like Justin Shorter, I was just so high on. He never really came to fruition. This wide receiver room, I think you have some guys that you know what you have, right? Xavier Henderson, Ricky Pearsall, two guys that are steady eddies, I think will be solid. Maybe can take the next step and be that wide receiver one. Caleb Douglas emerging. My eyes will be on the freshman, right? Eugene Wilson, not in Florida yet, but Aiden Mazzell, Andy Jean, two guys that have been making some noise in spring practice. Andy Jean sounding like he's a really developed route runner, kind of ready for early playing time at Florida. And then Aiden Mazzell, just an absolute burner, like 500-meter dash. Like, this dude has serious wheels, and that's kind of what you're looking for if you're the Florida Gators, right? You need some more juice on the outside. I'm really excited to see what Eugene Wilson looks like as he gets into Florida in the summer, because he's a little doesn't have the size that a guy like Aiden Mazzell has. Not necessarily the long speed, although he is fast. This dude has next level pop, next level juice in terms of quick twitch, making people miss, having the ball in space. So I'm excited. You look at these three receivers that they recruited in that 2023 class, and Andy Jean, Aiden Mazzell, and Eugene Wilson. I think they have the chance to be some big-time playmakers, and I think they have a chance to be instant contributors for this Florida Gators offense. Now, the next question mark, I don't have no question marks about the running back spot. Like Montrell Johnson Jr., Trevor Etienne, who looks even faster. I don't know if y'all saw that clip. He looks like he's absolutely burning. You bring in a guy like Cam Carroll, too, which low-key kind of a head-scratcher that he even transferred in, because I don't think he's going to be getting much playing time as a redshirt senior coming over from Tulane. But you feel really good about the running back room. Maybe you just wanted to add another body. Although Webb coming in, I like him a lot too. Again, getting back to where I have some question marks is the offensive line. If there was one consistent thing on this Florida offense last year, it was a phenomenal offensive line. Now, you're losing 4 out of the 5 starters. You hit the transfer portal to get some guys, and then you're also going to have some young guys step up. I'm really interested to see how this offensive line develops. Again, guys like Osiris Torrance, so solid for the Gators last year. They had a very good running attack. Can they kind of duplicate that? And again, Andy Jean, coming from the NFL on the offensive line, I'm optimistic that he can get this offensive line to where it needs to be. But I do think this is a big question mark when you lose 4 of the 5 guys who were playing meaningful snaps for Florida in 2022, one of which would probably be a first-round pick in Osiris Torrance. You have some transfers coming in, right? Micah Mizkua from Baylor, who was going to transfer, apparently not transferring. I don't think he's healthy. My eyes are on Keontae Goodwin. He was a guy that, as a Michigan fan, I really wanted them to land. He was between Kentucky and Michigan. He goes to Kentucky. This dude's a freak in terms of how big he is. I'm really excited to see because he's one of those guys that if you develop him, let him reach his potential, he's going to be an all SEC tackle. I'm really excited to see where he is at. We didn't get a ton of chances to see him as a freshman at Kentucky. Really excited to see how he's looking for them in the spring game. And then Damian George Jr., like, if they're on the boat, I wouldn't be surprised if he kicks on to the inside and you have Keontae Goodwin playing that tackle position. That would be a very fun one side of the offensive line with just a lot of girth. Austin Barber, hearing a lot of good things about him. I'm outside of those names, the transfers especially, I'm excited to see how this offensive line looks because that's something that was so good for Florida in 2022, and now they have some question marks with them in 2023. So the quarterback competition, how does this offensive line come together? And let's see some juice on at this wide receiver position. Probably the 3 things I'm looking for on the offensive side of the ball for the Florida Gators. Now, heading to the defense, one, Austin Armstrong, really like the hire. You look at what he did at Southern Miss. He's gonna drop the hammer. Like, he's gonna bring pressure. He's gonna create havoc. Kind of a high risk, high reward defense. He's gonna bring a lot of pressure. I'm excited to see how this defense looks. Right? He says he runs the 3-3-5. He's not really going to do that, I think. I think that's a defense that's going to have a lot of multiple different looks, and I'm a massive fan at that, especially at the college football level, right? When you're playing other college football teams, there's 2 ways you can kind of create havoc, create pressure. One, just your guys beating their guys. The other one, disguising blitzes. I think Austin Armstrong is a genius in terms of doing that, and it makes it a lot easier when you have different looking fronts. You're not really sure where the pressure is going to happen. So from a schematic standpoint, I'm less concerned with more of the personnel and more of just how does this defense look? How are they going to try to be bringing pressure from different spots? Now, on that defensive line, I am a little concerned, not concerned about the personnel, more excited, I would say. Last year, that defensive line had some players, right? Dexter was phenomenal in grading out his NFL film or grading him on his film for the NFL draft. He was very inconsistent. I'm sure a lot of Florida fans would agree with that. Want to know why I think he was inconsistent? Was he's played almost 700 snaps in 2022, which is far too many for a 300-plus pound defensive tackle, right? And so why did that happen? The depth simply was not there on the defensive line, and so you were relying on a guy like Gervon Dexter to play way too many snaps. This year, I think the depth is a little bit more there. Like we always said last year, this Florida first-team defense was really good. Outside of that first team, not so good. So I'm looking for a little bit more depth, specifically on the defensive line, because it gets really hard to play the same guys on that defensive line when they're 290, 300-pound dudes, and you're having to play a lot of snaps per game. A couple of guys that I want to keep a look at, Caleb Banks, Cam Jackson, coming over in the transfer portal, hearing really positive things about both of those guys. The 2 pieces that year, you're just adding some depth to. I think you know what you have with big Desmond Watson. My eyes are on some of the young cats, right? Will Norman is a dude that you look at him out of high school. I think he's ready to play football really quick during his Florida career. Kelby Collins is another guy that I'll have my eye on in terms of, are you ready to play football early? Both those guys, when you saw them coming out of high school, like those guys could be playing college football relatively soon. So I'm excited to see not only some of the transfers, but also some of those young guys. Are they ready to play and be productive early? And then Princely U, I have him really high on my 2024 draft board. I think he was starting to put it together last year. I think he could be really special. Now, that defense, you lose a guy like Ventura Miller hurts. Mitchell Trajada coming over from Ohio State. I think I said his name right. didn't really play for Ohio State that much, but again, former top 50 dude. Derek Wingo's a guy that I like a lot. I'm interested to see how that linebacker room looks. And then I'm not concerned with the secondary. I think the secondary is going to be solid. I think this defense is more reliant on how this defensive front is, right? You lose some of the best, I think one of the best safety duos in the country in Trey Dean and Rashad Torrance. How are you going to replace those safeties? I think Kamari Wilson is a guy that you're really excited about. Again, one of those crown jewel recruits in that 2022 class. And then some of the cornerbacks. Jalen Kimber, guy coming from Georgia, was a guy that I was kind of banging the table for last year. Don't think he played much for Florida last year, but seeing some of those guys in the secondary step up. But again, my eyes are going to be on both sides of the trenches, this offensive line and this defensive line. One, how is this first team offensive line coming together? Who are you going to look for? Because again, you lose a lot of guys. Cameron Waits, I believe, an Achilles injury. You have some concerns about that. And then let me just see some depth on the defensive line. Do you have enough guys that you trust to play early in this 2023 season? Because that's where I think Florida struggled the most. Those are kind of where my eyes will be for this Florida Gators team as they're playing spring game. And one thing I want to close out on, I love that they're playing it Thursday night. No other SEC or no other college football team in the country is playing their spring game Thursday night. What does that give you a chance to do? You're not competing with Florida State, Miami, Alabama, Georgia to get these commits on campus to watch the spring game. You're the only show on TV. And so I think they'll have a lot of potential commits in this 2024 class rolling in to watch the spring game. I think the environment, it was electric last year. I believe almost 50,000 people showed up. I think it'll be electric again this year. I think it could also be a big-time recruiting weekend. So if we do hear some news, we'll cover that as well. So if you guys do enjoy the content, again, wanted to get it out quick, but just talk about some of the things that I'll be looking for this Florida Gators team as you roll into this spring game Thursday night. Appreciate all the support. If you do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel. We'll be back Thursday night talking about what we got from the spring game. Again, appreciate y'all. You guys have been absolutely awesome, and we'll talk to y'all later. Y'all have a great Easter. Peace.